I noted last time how badly pro-slavery authors abused Genesis 9:25-27. Let's now take a look at two other major abuses of theirs from the Old Testament. As you might expect, one of the biggest arguments made by pro-slavery authors went like this. People in the Old Testament like Abraham had slaves. Having slaves was even allowed in the law. Therefore, we can have slaves too. I'm sure that sounds familiar, and you know what kind of people make that argument today. It sure isn't scholars. In the 19th century, not as many scholars responded to this argument by pointing out that the Old Testament actually depicted indentured servitude, as we've said. Some scholars had an idea about that, but a far more popular abolitionist response was to gig pro-slavery authors with the 19th century version of the Dr. Laura letter. Basically, that means they'd say in reply, if you guys are so gung-ho about the Old Testament, how come you're not eating kosher or keeping concubines? And more to the point, why are you ignoring various rules about treating your servants well, such as the requirement that you release a slave who had lost an eye or a tooth? Or what about the rule about releasing them after 6 years? The way pro-slavery authors responded to these criticisms was quite comical. In one case, one of them did a bait and switch, claiming that slaves from Africa ought to be equated with the foreign servants referred to in Leviticus. But note that those persons are called strangers that do sojourn among you. The analogy would hold if African persons immigrating to America were to become slaves. Other than that, though, they pretty much ignored the problem, which was probably their best option. One other argument I'll highlight will sound familiar also, because it's still used by fundy atheists today. Pro-slavery writers made light of the 10th commandment. They engaged this passage for the sake of a massive non sequitur. First, servants are listed with houses and donkeys and oxen. Second, donkeys and oxen were property. Therefore, they must all be considered property, which makes slavery acceptable. As I told fundy atheists who raised this one against prior vids in the series, this is an obvious category fallacy. The presence of two objects in the same list does not mean all the items share the same properties. That would be like saying that listing soap on a grocery list with beans and rice makes soap into food. I like something else an abolitionist said in reply to this misuse of the 10th commandment. It was pointed out that by the same logic, this makes wives property too. As we know, fundy atheists have indeed taken the 10th commandment to that conclusion, which is illogical for the same reason. But pro-slavery writers were in even more of a bind, since they were supposed to be obeying the 10th commandment. Tellingly, one of them took the bait and decided that wives actually were property. I don't think I'd want to be that guy when he got home.